Tomorrow night, President Trump will walk into the House chamber to deliver his State of the Union address. And for the first time in modern memory, a significant number of Democratic lawmakers won't be there to hear it. Over 20 Democrats, senators, House members, rising names in the party, have announced they are skipping the speech entirely, not walking out halfway through, not holding up signs, not heckling from the back row, just not showing up. And if you've been on social media for the past 48 hours, you've probably seen the backlash. You've seen people calling it disrespectful. You've seen people calling it childish. You've seen Stephen A. Smith, yes, the sports commentator, calling it juvenile.
The President of the United States is going to give his State of the Union address, and the Democrats got other plans. So some are talking about walking out in the middle of his speech. Others are talking about boycotting it altogether and essentially finding something else to do. I'm here to tell you that neither is acceptable. Neither should be acceptable. At some point in time, ladies and gentlemen, there's got to be an adult in the room. If you're going to act as juvenile, as petulant, as petty as you accuse the President of the United States to be, how are you ever going to hold a high moral ground, at least high enough to judge him accordingly? If people on the right can turn and look at you and say, you're no better, you act no better, where's it going to get you? See, these are the kind of things that end up getting people like myself and others in the news because we're talking about getting things done.
And look, I get why that sounds reasonable on the surface. The State of the Union is a tradition. It's one of the few remaining rituals in American politics that feels like it belongs to everyone. The president addresses a joint session of Congress, and both parties sit there. And we all pretend for 90 minutes that the Republic is functioning. But here's what I need people to understand. The question isn't whether boycotting the State of the Union is polite. The question is whether attending it is honest. Because let's talk about what's actually happening in this country right now. The context in which this speech is being delivered. As Trump walks up to that podium tomorrow night, the Department of Homeland Security is in its 10th day of a partial government shutdown. Day 10. The Coast Guard, FEMA, TSA, all operating without full funding. Global entry has been suspended. TSA PreCheck was briefly shut down before DHS reversed course after public outcry. FEMA has scaled back to bare minimum life-saving operations only, in the middle of a massive winter storm hitting the Northeast. And why is DHS shut down? Because Democrats in Congress are demanding reforms to immigration enforcement after CBP agents killed a U.S. citizen named Alex Preddy in January. That's the context. A federal law enforcement agency killed an American on American soil, and the party in power's response was to try to fund that agency with no strings attached. So Trump is going to stand at that podium in a building where part of his own government is shut down because his immigration agents killed someone, and he's going to tell the country that the State of the Union is strong. Meanwhile, 3 days ago, Friday, the Supreme Court handed down one of the most consequential rulings of the decade. In a 6-3 decision, the court ruled that Trump's emergency tariffs were illegal. Not questionable, not overreaching. Illegal. $160 billion collected under authority the president never had. The court said the International Emergency Economic Powers Act does not give the president the power to impose tariffs. Period. Trump's response? He immediately invoked a different law, Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, and slapped a 10% global surcharge on all imports, which he's now raising to 15%. A law his own Justice Department told the Supreme Court, during oral arguments, had no obvious application to the current trade situation. That's not my characterization. That's what the administration's own lawyers said. The European Union has frozen ratification of the Turnberry trade agreement. India has postponed its trade delegation to Washington indefinitely. France summoned the U.S. ambassador, and the ambassador didn't show up. These are not normal diplomatic events. These are the kinds of things that happen when the international order is fracturing in real time. So that's the backdrop. A partial government shutdown, an illegal tariff regime, global trade chaos, allied nations pulling back from the United States, and tomorrow night, Trump is going to stand up there and take a victory lap. The Democrats who are boycotting, they're saying they refuse to be the audience for that performance. Let's be specific about who's not going, because this isn't just a handful of progressives from safe blue districts making a symbolic gesture. Senator Adam Schiff of California announced Saturday that he's skipping the State of the Union for the first time in his entire career. Not just his Senate career, his entire time in Congress, going back to 2001. 25 years of attending every single State of the Union, under every president, and he's choosing this one to sit out.
Donald Trump is violating the law and Constitution. He is ignoring court orders. He has weaponized the Justice Department to go after his enemies. He is letting loose ICE troops in our streets that are getting people killed. I will not be attending the State of the Union. I've never missed one. I have always gone both to inaugurations and to States of the Union, but we cannot treat this as normal. This is not business as usual. I will not give him the audience he craves for the lies that he tells. I'll be outside the Capitol with Midas touch and move on for the People's State of the Union, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday.
Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut put it this way: Trump has turned the State of the Union into what amounts to a campaign rally. He said Democrats have no obligation to sit there and serve as the audience, while the president uses a constitutional ceremony to attack his opponents. Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland went further. He said he will not, his words, normalize what he called Trump's march toward fascism by attending the address. Senator Patty Murray of Washington said she's staying home and instead doing her own live-streamed address to her state, featuring constituents affected by Trump's policies. Senator Ruben Gallego of Arizona, a combat veteran, a Marine, said he'll be staying in Arizona rather than flying to Washington for the speech. And that's just the Senate side. In the House, you've got AOC, Pramila Jayapal, Greg Casar, who chairs the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Veronica Escobar, Becca Balint, Delia Ramirez, Yasemin Ansari, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Jan Schakowsky, Chantel Brown, Sean Casten, Sidney Kamliger-Dove, Dina Titus, Ami Bera, and the list keeps growing. These aren't backbenchers. These are committee members, caucus leaders, people with real institutional influence, collectively saying, "We will not lend this speech the legitimacy of a full chamber." Here's where it gets interesting, because the Democrats who are boycotting aren't just staying home and watching Netflix. They're doing something. At 8:30 tomorrow night, half an hour before Trump's speech, a rally called the People's State of the Union is going to start on the National Mall, right outside the Capitol. It's being hosted by Move On and Midas Touch, and it's going to feature the boycotting lawmakers alongside everyday Americans directly affected by Trump's policies. Federal workers who've lost their jobs, immigrants targeted by the administration, people dealing with the real-world consequences of the tariff chaos. It'll be hosted by Joy Reid and Katie Fang, and it's being live-streamed. At the same time, there's a second event called State of the Swamp at the National Press Club. Reps Eric Swalwell, Seth Moulton, and Dan Goldman, along with Senator Ron Wyden, are headlining that one. So here's the picture. While Trump is speaking inside the Capitol to a chamber that's noticeably emptier than usual, There are two separate Democratic counter-events happening simultaneously within blocks of the building. That's not running away from a fight. That's choosing a different battlefield. Now, and this is crucial, not every Democrat is boycotting. And the ones who are going are making their presence count in a very specific way. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is attending. He told reporters that Democrats could either show up in what he called silent defiance or participate in alternate programming. His message was clear. You don't let anyone run you off your block.
It's my present intention to be at the State of the Union. When I go into his house, he's coming to our house. And it's the people's house. And having grown up where I grew up, you never let anyone run you off your block.
But here's what Jeffries is bringing with him. And this is where it gets powerful. He's bringing a Jeffrey Epstein survivor as his guest. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is bringing Danny Bensky, a survivor of Epstein's abuse. Congressman Ro Khanna, one of the authors of the Epstein Transparency Act, the law that forced the release of millions of Epstein-related files, is bringing Haley Robson, who says she was trafficked by Epstein starting at age 16. Congressman Jamie Raskin and Congressman Suhas Subramaniam are bringing Sky and Amanda Roberts, the brother and sister-in-law of the late Virginia Roberts Giuffre, one of the most prominent Epstein survivors, who was instrumental in bringing his crimes to light. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, who's boycotting the speech herself, is sending Marika Chartouni, another Epstein survivor, to attend in her place. Think about that. Jayapal isn't going, but she's making sure a survivor is sitting in her seat. Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury is bringing New Mexico State Representative Andrea Romero, who launched a truth commission investigating what happened at Epstein's Zorro Ranch, a 7,600-acre property in New Mexico that, according to Romero, was never searched by federal law enforcement. Ever. Congressman James Walkinshaw is bringing survivor Jess Michaels. Congresswoman Teresa Ledger Fernandez is bringing survivor Elizabeth Stein. Congresswoman Maxine Dexter, who's boycotting, asked survivor Lisa Phillips to attend in her place. Republican Thomas Massey, who worked with Khanna on Epstein Transparency, estimated 10 to 12 survivors may be in attendance. So let me paint this picture for you. Tomorrow night, while Trump delivers his State of the Union, the gallery above the House floor is going to be filled with survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's trafficking operation. Survivors who have accused this administration of covering up co-conspirators and slow-walking prosecutions. Survivors who watched Attorney General Pam Bondi face questioning last week about the Justice Department's handling of the files, and who watched Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick face questions about his own interactions with Epstein. That's not a boycott and an empty room. That's a two-front operation. The boycotters are outside on the mall, telling their version of what's happening to this country. The attendees are inside the chamber, sitting silently, with Epstein survivors looking down from the gallery, serving as a living reminder of what this administration has failed to address. Now let's go back to the criticism, because I want to take it seriously. Stephen A. Smith called the boycott juvenile. He said there needs to be an adult in the room. He compared the Democrats' behavior to the kind of conduct they criticized Trump for. And Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat who is attending, said he hopes everyone who does show up does it with dignity and doesn't repeat what happened last year.
Where I'm at, and I do plan to go to the State of the Union, and then I do hope all the other Democrats that choose to come, that we don't do the same kinds of things that happened at the last year. I mean, it was really undignified. And just the thing, no, I don't care who the president is. Don't yell and disrupt that. It's like you really should respect the office. You don't have to like the occupant, but respect that. And that's, we should be better than that. So for me, as a Democrat, It's just calling balls and strikes, and I'm always going to pick country over party.
These are fair points. In a vacuum. If the State of the Union were happening in normal times, if the President were operating within normal constitutional boundaries, then yes, you show up, you sit respectfully, you clap politely when your side's policy gets mentioned, and you file out. That's how it works. But these are not normal times, and I think that's the point the boycotters are trying to make. Last year, Democrats tried it the other way. They showed up. They held up signs that said, "Liar" and "King" and "Save Medicaid." Al Green stood up and heckled the president with a cane pointed at the dais, and got dragged out of the chamber by the sergeant-at-arms. He was later censured. Other Democrats walked out mid-speech when Trump taunted Senator Elizabeth Warren. And what happened? The reviews were terrible. Critics on both sides called it performative, undignified, chaotic. The story became the Democrats' behavior, not the president's lies. The spectacle swallowed the substance. So this year, Democrats tried a different approach. Hakeem Jeffries basically told his caucus, either sit there quietly or don't come at all. No signs, no heckling, no walkouts, silent defiance, or alternate programming. Pick one. That's not juvenile. That's learning from a mistake. The boycotters aren't throwing a tantrum. They're making a calculated decision that their absence sends a stronger message than their presence. And based on the fact that we're all sitting here talking about it 2 days before the speech has even happened, it's working. One more piece of this that matters. The official Democratic response. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger will deliver the rebuttal immediately after Trump's speech. Senator Alex Padilla of California will deliver the Spanish-language response. Spanberger is a former CIA case officer who served 3 terms in Congress before being elected as Virginia's first female governor last November, by the largest margin for a Democratic candidate in 6 decades. She's a moderate. She's pragmatic. She campaigned on affordability and lowering costs. She's the kind of Democrat who wins in swing territory. The choice of Spanberger is significant. Democratic leadership is trying to show 2 things at once. On one hand, you have the progressives on the Mall, showing fire and resistance. On the other, you have a newly elected governor, delivering a measured, policy-focused rebuttal, showing voters that Democrats can also govern. Whether that strategy works is another question. But it's not chaos. It's choreography. Let me bring this back to the core question, because I think people are getting distracted by the optics. Tomorrow night, the President of the United States is going to address Congress while his Department of Homeland Security has been shut down for 10 days, while the Supreme Court has just told him his signature trade policy was illegal, while allied nations are pulling away, while Epstein's survivors are sitting in the gallery, staring down at him, while a winter storm is battering the Northeast, and FEMA has been scaled back to bare minimum operations, and he's going to stand there and tell you things are going great. The Democrats who are boycotting aren't saying they're above the institution. They're saying the institution is being used as a prop. They're saying you can't treat a constitutional ceremony as business as usual when the president is defying court orders, when his immigration agents killed a U.S. citizen, when his tariff policy just got struck down as illegal, and when the people most affected by his policies, from federal workers to trafficking survivors, are literally standing outside the building telling a different story. You can disagree with that. You can think they should go and sit quietly and clap when it's over. That's a legitimate position. But calling it juvenile is missing the point. The State of the Union is not a speech. It's a condition. And the condition right now, by any honest measure, is not something that should be normalized by a standing ovation. Governor Spanberger will deliver the Democratic response tomorrow night, after Trump's address. The People's State of the Union rally on the Mall starts at 8:30 Eastern, and it's being live-streamed. And the Epstein survivors will be watching from the gallery. Whatever version of reality Trump presents tomorrow night, the American people will have options for hearing the other side.